This is Bashy's Corner, a program where we invite guests from Danish society, people who can talk politics, culture, sports, development in the society, interculturalism, religion, whatever issue people will like to talk about, we invite them. The only condition is that they and me, we have a dialogue and cooperation. And that is why I have a very special guest today, Mr. Mohammad Mahfound. Welcome to my program.
Thank you.
It is very kind of you to come on such a short notice. And I'm sure that your information and knowledge about Syrian conflict is very important for Danish people, our viewers, to know the other side of the story, because you know we hear only one side.
Yes.
But before I start talk to you, conversation, I just want to say something to our viewers, a little bit background of Syrian conflict.
It's okay.
We have all been following the Syrian conflict ever since it started 4.5 years ago. We have seen pictures of total destruction of cities, destroyed infrastructure, dead babies on the beaches. 12 million people in Syria are displaced. 7 million inside Syria, 4.5, or maybe there's some people say 5 million, have left the country to save their lives. Most of them, they are living in Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey. That's what we call near areas or near countries. But in the last 1 year, the situation has got so bad that the refugee camps in near countries are filled with refugees. So some of them start marching towards Europe, a continent of peace, prosperity, and where you can have asylum. Unfortunately, some countries very quickly close their borders. And that is why the situation has become so bad that even our neighbor, Sweden, which is very well known for its humanistic policies, even Germany, which has taken hundreds of thousands of refugees, but in our little Denmark, we are very quick to send them back, or we don't want them. And you hear politicians saying we should have as less refugees as possible. A report published in United Nations in March 2015 estimated that the total economical loss in Syria is about $200 billion. That's a lot of money. And 1 in every 5 Syrians are now living under poverty. 30% of them are living under $1 a day. And Syria's education, health, and social welfare systems is totally in chaos. And as I said before, one thing is very strange, that this situation has been allowed to develop to such an extent that Syria is now almost decimated. And in Europe, we hear this one side of the story, how horrible Assad regime is, how many people they have killed, and that he is a brutal dictator. Very seldom we hear the other side of the story, meaning what the government stands for, why this conflict started, who is to blame, and how we can solve the problem. And that is why I'm, again, very, very thankful, Mr. Mahfound, that you come here. You're a chairman of the Danish Syrian Association.
Thank you.
And you are, I understand, a very tireless worker for the cause, and try to explain to Danish people that there are always two sides of the story.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, when you came to Denmark, and what have you been doing ever since you came?
Yes, I left Syria in 1985 to France to study medicine, and I get married there with affair with lady, and we left France to Faroe Island, and I worked there a little bit, 3-4 years, and we came to Denmark to get or to finish an education. And we was prepared to return to Syria or to Faroe Island, but it didn't work like that, and we stay in Denmark. I am working in Denmark, and I came to Denmark in 1992.
Okay.
To Copenhagen.
So what do you do now?
I'm working.
Okay.
I have auto school. Yes.
Ah, okay. So when did you establish Danish Syrian Association?
Yes, our organization was established shortly after the beginning of the conflict in 2011.
So it's rather new.
Yes, very new, because we thought it was very necessary to explain to the Danish people what's really happening in Syria, because we have all our families and our friends and all the people which live in Syria is in contact with us from Syria. Then we thought it was very useful that we bring the information from Syria, because we was very confused as everybody else. We heard only the Danish media or CNN or BBC, and they came with the same story always, as they did in before the war in Iraq, before the war in Libya, and then we feel that we are very what you call it, necessary to come with another side of the story, what the real Syrian in Syria think about the war in Syria.
How many Syrian, do you know how many Syrian there are in Denmark now after refugees came?
Well, now I don't really know exactly, but before the conflict we was about, somebody said about 4,000 to 5,000 Syrian in Denmark. But now maybe, I don't know, maybe they was talking about 20,000 or something like that. I don't have the real number about that. It changed from the one day to another day.
You told Danish media that your homeland is a very complex society. It's not black and white, you know, as sometimes you read. What do you mean by that?
I mean that in Syria we have different religions, we have different cultures. Yes, of course, I didn't deny that we had some problems, but everybody have a problems. We have problems here too in Denmark. But of course, some people was not satisfied with the government, but the majority of the Syrian people was satisfied, was living good in Syria. Syria was one of the most secure country in the world. You could send your wife or your daughter at midnight, at 1 o'clock, traveling in the town without problems, without protection. It was a very good country to live inside Syria.
I visited Damascus twice.
Okay.
And also Halb, and I can see what you're telling, because it was never any conflict, or there was no you know, people were not afraid. Everybody was doing what they were, and it was developing a lot of infrastructure, lot of development, new buildings, everything.
Yes.
So that is why I also wanted to know from you, because you have this other side. You said also that you have been interviewed by Danish and Western media about Syria, but still only the opposition side story comes again and again. Why?
Yeah, because we believe that the media in the Western media is not what you call it neutral. They have agenda or a political side. We saw that before the war in Iraq and before the war in Libya, and they are only looking from what the Western media is saying. Yes. For example, if we look to TV station as CNN and BBC and Al Jazeera, how much money they are putting in their propaganda against our president and against our government. Yeah. And of course, the Danish people will be affected from this propaganda. If you tell a lie many times a day, it will be a true. And that's what's happened in the conflict in Syria.
But then tell me, you take part in public debates, you have been interviewed, you also go to many conferences and speak up. Why you didn't succeed in changing some sort of opinion? Why, this only one side of the opinion is there?
Yes, I believe that we succeed if we look at the Danish people.
Okay.
When we are talking with ordinary Danish people, I can see that we change a lot of things.
Oh, really?
Because before, when some friends didn't want to talk to me in the beginning of or in the start of the conflict in Syria, they told me, how can you support a dictator who is killing his own people? But now I don't hear this kind of a question anymore.
I remember that I saw you first time in Danish Defense Council seminar on Syria.
Yes.
And you raised some question, and first time I said, oh, there's another part of the story. But then I also saw how many people were shouting at you, that you are a government agent and all that. That I know, I remember very well.
Yes.
So let's ask you, how did the conflict started? Because it's very important for our viewers to know that how it started and why did it escalate so much?
Yes, I believe that the most important for us now, it's not what's happened before. I am not more interested about what the solution now, but I will
shortly.
Talk about that,
I
will
will shortly.
Yes, I will shortly. Yes, somebody said that some people, what you call it, moderate people, ask about some changes. They want them. They was unsatisfied with some subjects, and they want a change. And the government was quickly in dialogue with these groups, and I believe that they succeed to achieve some kind of comprehension between the two sides.
There was March 2011 in Dera it started.
But the problem that there always was a third party in the conflict, and what we call it the people who want the conflict to escalate in Syria. And this third part, that's what in 2011 we said that there was some extremist, which includes the Muslim Brotherhood and another organization, Jund al-Sham, on many extreme groups in Syria was involved, and they saw the possibility, and they saw that it was a chance for them to establish at what you call it Khalifa in Syria, as in Iraq and in
but
Libya.
Some people
and
say that
places.
Security forces opened fire and killed many people in Dera in March. Is it true?
Yeah, but there are somebody else who said that some from the demonstrator who started to shoot on the security forces, and the security forces, of course, defend themselves.
So then there's a question that in July 2011, there were hundreds and thousands of demonstrators who were demanding that President Assad should go. Don't you think that if he would have maybe leave the presidency, it's not me to decide, but then the situation would not escalate?
Yeah, but we don't believe it's the problem was the President Bashar al-Assad, if he stay in power or not. It's not the problem. We can't accept that there are 23 million in Syria. If 100,000 or 200,000 demonstrate to ask the president to leave from his mouth, I don't agree that it is a democracy to just to comply with this 100 or 200,000 people. I don't believe the Danish government or the Prime Minister in Denmark will leave his position if there are 5,000 or 6,000 Danish people who ask him to leave his job.
So he's democratically elected?
Yes, now he is democratically selected because Bashar al-Assad came to power in comprehension in the parliament in Syria. They
after his father died?
Yes, after that. Yes, it was a comprehension in the parliament to decide to give him the power in Syria.
Okay.
And we saw that he is very popular in Syria now, because the last election we saw some Syrian here in Denmark and in Germany, they traveled to Sweden, to Stockholm, to vote to Bashar al-Assad. He is, well, I will believe that the majority of the Syrian people is always, or what you call it, supporting Bashar al-Assad until now, because people is afraid what will happen if we look to Iraq, what's happened in Iraq, what's happened in Libya, what's happened in Afghanistan. People is afraid, and they see the only solution right now is our government, to support our government and to support our President Bashar al-Assad.
But is it true that the conflict has become now, according to the Western media, a Shia-Sunni problem, whereas President Assad and his regime is supported by Iran and Hezbollah movement in Lebanon, and also some portion of Iraqi population which is Shia, and then the other side, the rebellions, the groups are being supported by Saudi Arabia, about Turkey, Emirates, Gulf states, and of course United States and UK and France. You know, so do you think that if it was not Shia-Sunni problem, then it will not be such a big problem?
Well, it was never a problem in Syria between Shia or Sunni or Muslim or Christian. Syria was an example how people, how religions can live together peacefully. Well, all this kind of propaganda of sectarian problem in Syria, it came from Saudi Arabia. We all know that all those conflicts come from Arabs, from Saudi Arabia. And we saw just this week how they execute a religious leader in Saudi Arabia.
And broke the relation with Iran.
Yes, this problem has never existed in Syria. You know, in Syria, the majority of the people is Sunni Muslim. But if Bashar al-Assad was not supported from all his people, he will never could survive 4.5 brutal war on Syria from all the countries outside this Syria.
So let me understand, Syrian population of 23 million, so how many percent are Alawite?
Yes, there are many what you call it numbers, but I believe that there are about 20% of the Syrian people is Alawite, and the majority there we have Christian, maybe 7-8%.
Okay.
Yes, and of course the majority in Syria is Sunni Muslims, Sunni Muslim, but not what we see from the Wahhabi, from Saudi Arabian, ordinary Muslim as us.
Okay, now I want to ask you a very political question, and I want you to answer me straight away. Do you believe that USA and Europe has played a very big part in this conflict?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I don't believe that what we call ISIS today, it's come just like that. If we go back to the war in Afghanistan, if somebody said that the American, what you call it, established Al-Qaeda, maybe that time will say, everybody will say it's not true. But we know that USA has established Al-Qaeda to fight against Afghanistan. And I believe that the West and NATO, because this conflict in Syria now, it's not against, we are not fighting against only ISIS. We have to look a little bit more bigger. We talk about Turkey. Turkey, it's a NATO land. We are fighting, the Syrian army is fighting against NATO since 2011. If we look in the south of Syria, we have Israel. They are also involved in this conflict.
Israel is involved in that?
Yes, they are bombing in Damascus. Always. 1 month ago, they bombed inside Damascus. Israel is involved, Turkey is involved, Jordan is involved. In the start, Lebanon, what you call it, the west of Syria, southwest of Syria, we have Tripoli. There have many extremists and terrorists who entered to Syria from Lebanon.
But then the other side can say that Russia has been supporting Bashir Assad and also giving weapons, and now they are actually bombing, the opposition group, not ISIS.
You know, I don't believe that Russia is supporting Bashar al-Assad. It's not true. Russia, as United States and as France and England, they are fighting for their interests in the Middle East, in Syria. I don't believe that Russia is coming to Syria to help Bashar al-Assad or somebody else.
But they have a very big port in Latakia, where you come from. They have a very big naval base.
It is true. Russia is defending their position in the Middle East, but it doesn't give the right to the American. The American was involved since 2011. The Russian was involved only the last 5-6 months. I believe that the Russian people or the Russian government want that the Syrian has to discuss and to find a solution from Syria, from Syrians, and that's what I support as many Syrians, that we have to talk together.
But for finding a solution, you have to have partner who can sit down. There was meeting in Geneva, there was meeting in United Nations, nothing comes out. United States says, in the beginning they said that there will be no solution in Syria if Bashar al-Assad does not leave. So that was a condition. But now they have changed their opinion now. Why did it happen?
Yes, because I believe that the USA and the West, they understood that the Syrian president is supporting by his own people. If he wasn't supported by his people, he will not could survive the 4 and almost 5 years now. We believe that the US and the other countries, they can see the real dangerous situation in Syria about ISIS and the another extreme groups as Jabhat al-Nusra and Jaish al-Islam and the another groups, and they begin to understand that there are no way from involve the Syrian government and the majority of the Syrian people in this issue now. That's why they change their position.
This is what you call ISIS. This is what in Arabic they call Daesh.
Daesh, yes. Okay. Yes, Daesh. We call it Daesh. Yes.
All right. So who is supporting Daesh? I mean, they have been fighting for 2 years now with heavy weapons, their modern equipment, and a lot of money. There must be somebody giving them money, giving them weapons.
Yes, I believe that Daesh is supported by United States. If you see from the Iraqis military and the Iraqis officers, they was complying and they was saying that the American is throwing support from the sky to Daesh, weapon and ammunition and food. Well, the American said it was a mistake. But it's happened many times, and we saw the last months that the American bombed some Iraqi military in Iraq.
So you believe that Daesh can be defeated?
Of course, they can be defeated if United States and the West want to defeat them.
And they don't want?
They don't want, because if we see the Russian intervention in Syria, how could the Russian achieve in 5-6 months what the United States and many other countries, include Denmark, they couldn't achieve in 1.5 years? That's why we believe that the West is not fighting against Daesh and against the Islamic State in Syria, really. Yes, they want maybe to make them weak, to control them, but they don't want to eliminate Daesh or ISIS from Syria.
But now recently there was a meeting in United Nations, and now they want to talk. They want to bring everybody, Saudi Arabia, Iran. But now after this Iranian-Saudi conflict, do you think it will happen?
Well, I believe, I don't really believe that the opposition who is living in the outside of Syria, they are not a real opposition. The real opposition in Syria is still living in Syria. And the opposition in Syria is willing to negotiate with the government.
Okay.
And I believe that achieved many things between the real opposition in Syria. But the opposition who is controlled or owned by Saudi Arabia or by Turkey or by United States, I don't believe that they have support in the Syrian population. That's why the Syrian government has to understand with who is going to negotiate. Shall the Syrian government negotiate with Jabhat al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda in Syria, or they are going to negotiate with Jaish al-Islam, it's extreme group in Syria? With who they are going to negotiate?
So what is, in your opinion, the best solution?
The best solution in Syria, the solution will be, of course, to stop the war. And we can stop the war in Syria if we put a pressure in Turkey to control their borders. Turkey is very, very deep involved in this conflict in Syria.
Why do
they are helping? They have their interest because they are afraid from the Kurdish, Syrian Kurdish in the north of Syria. They have their own problems with their own country in Turkey. If we put a pressure in Turkey to control their borders, to forbid extremists and what you call terrorists to enter Syria, all the weapon who was used in Libya is transferred by Turkey inside Syria, which Saudi Arabia and Qatar is supporting and financing this transport the weapon from Libya. And we have to go and to lay pressure on Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Everybody know who is financing, give money to supporting Daesh in Syria.
But do you think that America and the West will put pressure on Saudi Arabia when they know that is the largest oil producing country?
No, no, they will not do that. That's, I believe that the solution is in Syria. We can't go to a political solution when you have Daesh and al-Nusra and Jaish al-Sham and Jaish al-Islam in Syria. We can't do that. We have to defeat the extremists, the terrorists in Syria, and then we can negotiate with the real opposition in Syria, inside Syria.
I will give you 1 minute to look in the camera and tell the Danish people, very short, how they should look at the conflict.
Yes, I will ask the Danish people to not trust too much the media. They have to try to listen what Syrian in Syria want and how the Syrian in Syria think about the solution in Syria. That's what I ask the Danish to understand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahfound.
Thank you to you.
I'm very happy that you came and gave the other side. And for my viewers, I hope that this information you got from us will help you to understand the complexity of the problem. Until next week, see you. Bye-bye.